Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear that we will work with anyone in this town who's interested in making life better for the American people. House Democrats believe that America is too expensive. We're committed to lowering housing costs, child care costs, grocery costs, insurance costs, and utility costs. There are far too many people in the United States of America who are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. That should not happen in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Republicans and Donald Trump spent all of last year promising to lower the high cost of living. They haven't done a damn thing to do it. Not a single thing. Trump promised that costs in America would go down on day one. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. Inflation is on the way up. Our credit rating as a country has been downgraded. The bond markets are having an adverse reaction to Trump's presidency. The Trump tariffs are going to increase costs on everyday Americans by thousands of dollars a year. Donald Trump and House Republicans are crashing the American economy and are driving us toward a recession. Yet House Republicans, later on this afternoon, are going to put forward a reckless rescissions package that's going to undermine America's national security, hurt our ability to protect the American people in terms of their health, their safety, and their well-being, including by going after a George W. Bush bipartisan initiative that has saved thousands, actually hundreds of thousands, actually millions of lives across the world by combating the HIV and AIDS crisis. And yet Republicans want to rip billions of dollars away from America's efforts to keep her people safe and secure, to satisfy some extreme ideological crusade related to a deeply unpopular effort formerly led by Elon Musk to devastate the American way of life. And in all likelihood, every single House Republican, despite the claims that there's some anxiety, will cave to Donald Trump and vote for the reckless Republican rescissions package. House Republicans aren't interested in functioning like a separate and co-equal branch of government and holding the Trump administration accountable for its extremism. House Republicans will continue to behave like nothing more than a reckless rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda, just like they did yesterday, and they'll do the same thing today in voting to cut programs that are important when it comes to protecting the health, the safety, the national security, and the economic well-being of the American people. Questions?
Leader Jeffries, does uniting against this rescissions package possibly risk handing Republicans an easy optics win in terms of presenting themselves as the fiscally responsible party?
The last thing that Republicans are at this moment in time, or have ever been over the last few decades, is fiscally responsible. The one big ugly bill that Republicans are trying to jam down the throats of the American people will detonate the deficit by more than $3 trillion and add trillions of dollars to our national debt, which is already out of control because of reckless Republican spending during the first Trump administration. Approximately 25% or so of our nation's debt in this country, a debt that is out of control, that we need to do something about, approximately 25% of our nation's debt was accumulated during Donald Trump's first 4 years in office, which relate in many ways to the original GOP tax scam, where they set in motion tax cuts that disproportionately benefited the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, and borrowed more than $2 trillion, adding to our debt to benefit their billionaire donors. It's extraordinary. There is not a single Republican in this town that can credibly argue they are the party of fiscal responsibility. And in fact, that was one of the reasons why Elon Musk called the one big ugly bill a disgusting abomination, because it will set in motion the possibility that America is on a unsustainable path toward bankruptcy. That's trillions of dollars. And Republicans won't have any ability to convince anyone about the reality being different.
What do you make of Congress, and Republicans in Congress, just approving this spending back in March with the CR, and the toing and froing a couple months later want to cut out some of that, the conceivable inconsistency of that, approving that to keep the government open and then changing policy just a couple months later?
It's not shocking to me, because at the end of the day, Republicans have consistently been lying to the American people about trying to build an affordable economy, about stability in the federal government, about meeting the needs of the American people. And then, after jamming a partisan bill through the House of Representatives, turn around and are doing the bidding of this extreme administration by cutting billions from programs that are designed to protect America's national security interests and stop diseases or epidemics from reaching our shores. That's what the PEPFAR program is all about. And it's a bipartisan program. It was President George W. Bush's initiative, working with Democrats in the House, like former Representative Barbara Lee. These are exactly the type of things that we should be embracing, not running away from. But Republicans have been extreme in their approach and deeply ideological. They've got no plan, no vision, no ideas, and no bill that actually improves the lives of everyday Americans and is designed to build an affordable economy. And this legislation is just the latest example of Republicans trying to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people, which will hurt everyday Americans. And it's all ultimately in service of rewarding their billionaire donors.
The United Nations nuclear watchdog has officially declared Iran a breach of its non-proliferation obligations. Do you believe that it's crossed a red line that would warrant a military response?
Have not had a security briefing on this issue, so before I can address it with any degree of certainty, I'll need to have that secure briefing. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. You called the Republicans' budget bill a tax scam, and it includes provisions like no tax on tips and overtime, and it also increases the child tax credit. What are your thoughts on provisions like that?
Republicans actually have decreased the child tax credit from the enhanced and expanded child tax credit that was enacted into law as part of the American Rescue Plan. The reason why the enhanced and expanded tax credit no longer exists is because Republicans killed it. So they can't claim any credit for anything as it relates to the child tax credit in this bill. Now, we have repeatedly said to our Republican colleagues that there are a wide variety of areas where we can make life better using the tax code for everyday Americans that we as Democrats support, including no taxes on tips, where we have a far more comprehensive bill than the expiring provisions that are in the GOP tax scam. That's one of the reasons why the GOP tax scam is such a fraud. The provisions in the GOP tax scam that benefit billionaires and wealthy corporations are permanent. And any modest relief that Republicans are providing to everyday Americans expires shortly after it is enacted. And understand something, that all Republicans are doing with respect to tax rates is to keep the tax rates currently where they are right now. That's not putting additional dollars in the pockets of most Americans. So once again, they're over-promising and they're going to under-deliver. Just like Donald Trump and Republicans did all last year. The core promise that Donald Trump made to the American people is that I'm going to lower your costs on day one. That didn't happen. We're months into the administration. Costs aren't going down. They are going up. The Trump tariffs is actually raising costs by thousands of dollars a year and making life more expensive. So there's a reason why the GOP tax scam right now is deeply unpopular. Not a single public opinion survey has been released that shows the one big ugly bill with a favorable approval rating. Not a single public approval survey. It's underwater across the board, including, in some instances, with Republican-leaning voters and definitively with independents. The American people know that Republicans are trying to scam them. And the more they know, the worse it gets. This one big ugly bill is the largest tax cut for billionaires in American history. At the same time, that it's the largest cut to health care in American history. More than 16 million Americans will lose health care as a result of this bill. Tens of millions more will pay higher premiums, co-pays, and deductibles. It's the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history, more than $300 billion cut from the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, meaning Republicans are literally snatching food from the mouths of children, veterans, and seniors. Why? To pay for massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors. The more the American people learn about the one big ugly Republican bill, the more unpopular it becomes.
Thank you. Just looking long term at the appropriations process, are you concerned at all about where that stands and the ability to pass an appropriations bill by the next fiscal year?
Donald Trump and House Republicans have a decision to make. Do they want to work in a common sense, bipartisan way to find common ground, or are they going to try to jam an ideological right-wing bill down the throats of the American people in a partisan fashion? If they choose the latter approach, we're going to have challenges in September.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. When the reconciliation bill was under consideration in the House, Democrats had days of actions, weeks of actions, shadow hearings, just like you said, a more and more environment. Now that the bill is under consideration in the Senate next week while you all are on recess, will there be any activities with Senate Democrats? What will you be up to as you continue to make the case against this bill for the American people?
Next week, we're going to have a Save Our Hospitals Week of Action. And that will be all across the country, and we'll do it in partnership with advocacy organizations, healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, social workers, technicians, and most importantly, everyday Americans whose health will be devastated by the GOP tax scam if this one big ugly bill ever becomes the law. Hospitals will close if Republicans are successful in passing the GOP tax scam. Hospitals in rural America will close. That is incredibly disturbing. Lives will be lost. Hospitals in urban America, in suburban America, exurban America, small town America, and the heartland of America will close. That has an impact on everyone, not simply people who get their health care through Medicaid. That's bad enough that you're ripping health care away from millions of people. But as a result of the GOP tax scam and the fact that hospitals are being targeted, that's not just our view as Democrats. Hospitals have been on the Hill saying it to all of us over the last few weeks, last few months. And so next week, while we're out on the district work period, collectively, I think you're going to see hundreds of different events that will take place as part of our effort to save our hospitals in the United States of America.
It's been reported that Texas Republicans are going to meet with the White House today to talk about redistricting. How are House Democrats prepared to respond to a mid-cycle redistricting in Texas?
It's very interesting. 2 points here. One, despite all of the talk that Republicans won some massive mandate in November of 2024, this majority that House Republicans have right now is the narrowest that any party has had since 1931 during the Great Depression. They have the narrowest majority that any party has had in the House of Representatives since 1931, almost 100 years ago. And when Republicans in the House are at full strength, they're at 220. When Democrats are at full strength, we're at 215. That means it's a 3-vote difference between House Democrats and House Republicans. Now, North Carolina is a 50-50 state. And prior to the extreme mid-decade redistricting that Republicans engaged in so they could rig the majority for themselves, the North Carolina delegation, as recently as January 2nd of this year, was 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans. That was the North Carolina delegation in Congress. That makes sense. It's a 50-50 state. Donald Trump won the state. So did every single Democrat running statewide, including the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and in the state Supreme Court race. 50-50 state. It had a 50-50 delegation, 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans, as recently as January 2nd of this year. But what happened? Republicans engaged in mid-decade redistricting. They stole 3 Democratic seats that we held. Kathy Manning, Jeff Jackson, Wiley Nickel, and they made them safe Republican districts. So now the Republican delegation to North Carolina is 10 Republicans, and on the Democratic side, there's 4. The Republicans wouldn't even be in the majority right now if it were not for extreme partisan mid-decade redistricting in North Carolina. They stole 3 seats, meaning they hijacked the majority, not by earning it, through extreme partisan gerrymandering. So it was always a joke that Republicans were championing the dawn of a new era that was somehow validated by the American people across all levels of government. It was not. It was not. When Donald Trump won in 2016, he lost the popular vote. He came to Congress. There were 241 Republicans and only 194 Democrats. This time around, it's basically a 50-50 House, and they wouldn't even be in the majority if it were not for extreme partisan, mid-decade, unprecedented gerrymandering in North Carolina. What lesson have Republicans learned from that? Let's do it again in Texas, because we can't independently make our case to the American people as to why we should hold this majority. They couldn't even in the last race when they had everything working in their favor at Donald Trump being at the top of the ticket. The challenge that Republicans have right now is that the way in which the Texas map has been drawn, it's already an extreme partisan gerrymander. And so if you make any changes to that map, which quite frankly, there are several Democrats who have looked at it who perhaps may welcome changes, they're going to endanger at least 4 to 6 Republican incumbents who are serving in the Congress right now, are in safe Republican districts, and will likely be put into competitive districts that Democrats can win, particularly in a midterm election with Donald Trump in the White House. Be careful what you wish for. A lot of Democrats that we've talked to from Texas who've actually come to the conclusion, based on the fact that the map is already gerrymandered at its height, that they could open up 4 to 6 swing seat opportunities that don't exist right now for Democrats. And instead of doing what they did in North Carolina, where they basically snatched victory from the jaws of electoral defeat that they were heading toward, they actually could provide enough seats in Texas alone for Democrats to take the majority back. Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it and you won't like the result.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. So Congresswoman Delia Ramirez and a bunch of other progressives introduced legislation to condition weaponry and aid to Israel. And this is coming at a time where Israel's escalating the war, and also just the war has reached critical levels. And I wanted to know, what's your reaction to that legislation, and also more broadly, what is House Democratic leadership's position on the war in Gaza at the moment?
My position has been the same, that we've got to do 2 things and do 2 things urgently. Every single hostage needs to be returned home, and we have to surge humanitarian assistance into Gaza to help out those Palestinian civilians who have been in harm's way through no fault of their own. Those have to be the highest priorities. And from there, we need to return to the ceasefire agreement that had previously been reached, so that there's a pathway toward a just and lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinian people that provides safety and security for the state of Israel, and a real meaningful path towards self-determination and dignity for the Palestinian people, which to me means a 2-state solution.
Leader Jeffries, do you have any concerns or fears about the Saturday Army parade with tanks in the streets and soldiers, being reviewed by President Trump?
It's important to wish the United States Army a happy 250th birthday. I think all of us on the Democratic side value and respect the United States Army and the United States military. And that's an incredible milestone, 250 years. It's also important to note, which I think will be pointed out in communities all across the country, that the United States Army was formed in order to depose a king and to push back against the conditions that were being inflicted on the American people at the time by the British monarchy and King George. That was why the U.S. Army had been formed. And so I think what you'll see across the country is people validate the principle that in America, and we'll celebrate our 250th anniversary next year, there are no kings, there are no monarchs, there are no dictators. We have a democracy. We don't work for Donald Trump. We don't work for J.D. Vance. We don't work for Elon Musk. We work for the American people. And Congress has a role to play in that as a separate and co-equal branch of government. Republicans haven't been doing that. They are a reckless rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda. And the American people are going to reject that clearly and decisively next November. But in the interim, as Democrats, we have a responsibility to stand up and push back against the assault on the economy, the assault on health care, the assault on Social Security, the assault on the rule of law, the assault on the American way of life, and the assault on democracy itself. I expect you'll see people do that all across the country, peacefully, at all times, peacefully in the spirit of our civil rights heroes and foot soldiers and great leaders like John Lewis, with righteous indignation, but peacefully. And Saturday, I think you'll see that happen all across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a debate going on in your caucus about how members should talk about what's happening in LA, how directly to address the violence. Where do you stand on that?
Violence is never acceptable in any form or fashion. Any single individual that assaults police officers, that destroys property or breaks the law should be held accountable by law enforcement authorities at the local or state level. The American people have a clear right to peacefully assemble, to petition the government to address grievances that may exist from a policy standpoint. That's part of our culture, peaceful protest. And that's what we'll continue to urge people to do across the nation as appropriate. But as Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass have consistently made clear, violence will not be tolerated. And it should not be tolerated ever. The irony of this situation is that Donald Trump and House Republicans have zero credibility on the issue of law and order in the United States of America. They should not be taken seriously at all on the issue of law and order and on the issue of backing the blue. Are you kidding me? Donald Trump, on his first day in office, pardoned 1,500 people, violent felons, amongst them hundreds of violent felons and criminals who brutally beat police officers on January 6th. Donald Trump pardoned them. And this guy and House Republicans think they can lecture America about issues of law and order? Get lost. You have zero credibility on this issue. None. You can lecture no one on this issue. When you unleash these violent felons who were brazen enough to beat police officers in plain view for all of America to see, and you pardon them and then release them back into communities all across America, several of whom have re-engaged in criminal activity, and we're supposed to believe that Republicans stand for backing the blue? Are you kidding? Republicans under Donald Trump have become the party of lawlessness and disorder. Thank you, everyone.